Well, hello, Afghan viewers. This morning I'm speaking with Major General Greg Melick. He's the National President of the RSL. He's been calling on the government recently to fast-track the visa processing for Afghan support staff who've supported the Australian mission in Afghanistan. And he's also been dealing with a range of concerns about his and the RSL's role in supporting the Royal Commission into Veteran Suicides. So, Greg Melick, welcome to ABN and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, Mark.
Okay, so let's start out with the Royal Commission. You've previously expressed the view that the Royal Commission was an inferior option to the government's preferred model of a permanent National Commissioner for Defence and Veteran Suicide Prevention. Do you still hold that view?
Oh, certainly. As do most people who understand mental health issues. And for example, the Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatrists, Mental Health Australia, Suicide Prevention Australia. To me, it's a no-brainer, which was the better model. But as we've said right from the word go, we would fully support whatever model the government implemented.
Yeah, but also there was a lot of support for that model from within the veteran community. And do you think they got it wrong, or they just didn't understand the issues?
When you say the veteran community, the majority of the veteran community that engaged with us agreed with our approach.
Mm-hmm.
There is a very noisy element of the veterans community, and whether they're in a minority or majority, I just don't know. We don't have any way of telling. But I don't think they're fully informed. I'm actually probably in an unusual situation that I've exercised the powers similar to that of a Royal Commissioner on thousands of occasions.
Mm-hmm.
I've appeared before Royal Commissions and Commissions of Inquiry.
Yeah.
And I've represented many veterans and police officers suffering from mental health trauma in Supreme Court actions. And I've seen the effect it has on them and the problems surrounding it. I mean, it's not very edifying when you have somebody who hasn't even got into court to give his evidence, but he carted off in an ambulance to hospital on suicide watch because of the stress of thinking about having to relive his experiences. So our view has always been that you want something a little less low key than a Royal Commission. You don't want people to feel as though they're being interrogated, and worse still, you don't want things on the front page of the newspaper every day for veterans who can't help being exposed to that, reliving some of their traumatic experiences. Yeah,
it was certainly a concern for some about bringing people back into a sort of commission type environment and the additional stress and trauma that would create. But I guess one of the issues is that there was a significant push from within the veteran community, as you say, maybe a noisy push for the support behind a Royal Commission. And a lot of that came from not just because there was a stronger support for the Royal Commission, but people just didn't trust and like the way the National Commissioner was implemented. Do you think that was a factor in why state branches such as Victoria voted to get behind the call for a Royal Commission?
Look, I don't really know what their thinking was. There are a lot of very angry people out there, and some of them quite justifiably angry. There are a lot of people, unfortunately, seeking revenge. They're looking for somebody to blame, and they thought the Royal Commission might be the appropriate blowtorch to apply to those people. I don't know how helpful it will be trying to find people to blame, bearing in mind that people within DVA and Defence certainly haven't gone out and deliberately engaged in any actions to increase the harm to veterans or exacerbate their mental health issues.
Yeah.
I had some concerns about the model, which I communicate to government on behalf of the RSL, including not looking far enough back. As far as we're concerned, there should be no time limits on these matters.
Mm-hmm.
But I find it interesting that people said it wouldn't be independent. It was actually supported by the same staff that supported the Banking Royal Commission, and the same sort of people who will probably support the Royal Commission, who are lawyers employed by the government, and they'll bring in some outside lawyers as well.
Mm.
And there is also a problem, of course, with Bernadette Boss, who's a very capable and experienced individual, but of course she'd only been out of defence a matter of days before she was appointed. That, of course, was we considered a problem, and we told government so, and put out a press release to that effect. But that could have been remedied by, she was only the interim commissioner anyway, that once the legislation went through appointing a suitably qualified commissioner, bearing in mind, I think this job's far too big for one person. I would have thought they're going to need a panel of at least at least three people, if not more. And I think people have got to be careful. Just because somebody may have worked for government in the past doesn't mean they're not going to be independent. In fact, I've known Bernadette Boss for a long time. She would have been ferociously independent. But many veterans, including the RSL, considered her appointment inappropriate because of perceptions, not because of ability, or not because she would not have been independent.
Some of these things, Greg, and we're talking about not just the government's position on this and the appointment of Bernadette Boss, who as we've written about, we think is probably a very competent and capable person. But there were certainly some issues around the way it looked in terms of her military background, career background, and I guess links with the government, but also the fact that the commissioner was to work inside the structure of the Department of Attorney General. So there was a couple of things there that actually people had some concerns about. Is this a matter of some engagement issues in terms of, letting people understand these issues more broadly? I mean, did the RSL in particular do enough? Did the government do enough to explain the setup of this commissioner and how it was going to operate? And was that, is that a factor in the way this has turned out now?
I think part of the problem was that the government announced its intention to appoint an interim commissioner, and then took far too long to appoint an interim commissioner. And that allowed people to become suspicious. Why is it taking so long? What's going on? Let's have a royal commission. It was difficult for us to go out and fully explain what the commission was going to do or not do, because we were still negotiating with the government about some of the aspects of the bill with which we had problems. But the one thing that concerned me, I went out to everybody and said, please explain to me what a royal commission could achieve that the permanent veteran suicide commissioner could not achieve. And of course, there was no logical answer to that. But be that as it may, we've now got a royal commission. We will do our best we'll certainly do our best to support it. And we've certainly had tried to have some significant input into the terms of reference. Because once again, the terms of reference of this royal commission cannot be limited. The commissioners must be able to reach back, and they must deal with whole of life experiences of veterans who are suffering mental health trauma. It's a very complex, multifaceted issue. It's not going to help just looking at effects that defence or interaction with defence or DVA may have had on these people. We need to fully understand what the whole of life experiences are that contribute to these matters, so we can deal with it. Once people join defence or become aware they're having issues, we can attack all of the problems, not just a part of it.
Yeah, certainly a holistic approach is required to actually have a look at the full. It's not just there's not just a simple linear pathway here either. There's so many dimensions to an individual's experiences that need to be taken into account. And I don't think it's a simple let's have a look at the life cycle of a veteran, for example, because everybody has very different experiences and impacts on their lives from internal and external factors.
Look, as I said, I've done over 50 of these cases. And when you look at the mental health, when you look at the psychiatrist reports on individuals, their interaction with the police or defence duties are often only a small part of the problem. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. And there are reasons why some people are able to, there are reasons why some people are able to handle the horrors and traumas of war, or being a police officer, attending crime scenes and motor vehicle accidents, etc., and others can't. There are often genetic factors as well as life experience factors.
Yeah. So, given our recent experience, and I guess it's fair to say that some of the, as you indicated, the emotions around this topic have been very high indeed. People have campaigned and rallied and so forth. Are there any lessons to be learned, I guess, from an engagement perspective, particularly from the RSL and the way we sort of explain and talk to people about the position and the policy positions that the League wants to take on certain matters?
Look, it's difficult. We have about 160,000 members. We have 1,192 sub-branches. We'll discuss things at a national board level. We'll feed information out to the states and say, please gather information or get people's views on X, Y, and Z. And we then rely upon what comes back to us. And the only state that was in favour of a Royal Commission was Victoria. So we put our national position as a majority position with the terms of reference. We set out draft terms of reference to every state. We asked them to consult widely. We've taken into account everything we could to making it without making a 100-page document and submitted the terms of reference. We've been criticised already for some of the aspects we put in the terms of reference, one of them being the effects of social media, because one of the things that concerns us and concerns us, many psychiatrists I've spoken to, is the damaging effect of misinformation that appears on social media. And it's very difficult to counter that sort of material because it just gets swamped by the mass of what I regard as not fully informed material.
Okay, so there are obviously, particularly, well, I know in my home state of Victoria, there are some tensions, and there are groups who are calling for significant reform within the RSL, and a lot of their efforts are fueled by their ability to access and use social media. But at the same time, it's also part of the democratic process that most Australians tend to enjoy, the opportunities to speak out. But the rules and bylaws of the RSL certainly make it difficult for people to speak out against the league. And we've certainly at Australian Veteran Youth been advised that some members feel that they're worried about speaking out against issues against the league because their membership might be threatened as a result of that.
I personally don't have a problem with people speaking out against the league if it's informed and accurate. I'm concerned that a lot of the material that's been coming out of Victoria, I know, is factually incorrect, in fact, quite defamatory, and that's not helpful. My view is that the league is a democracy. It's run democratically, and people should be able to express firm views if they disagree with approaches. It's just a question of how those views are expressed in the language with it's expressed, and as I said, more importantly, make sure it's based upon appropriate facts. And I have never had any problem with a member of the league coming direct to me, but I'm aware that some state branches are concerned about things being done through the state so they know what's going on and don't get blindsided.
And look, I think I personally agree with you. I think that sounds fair enough. I mean, obviously, people calling out and defaming others and getting into the innuendo and so forth, I think through social media is not at all helpful. But the question is, how do we balance and safeguard people who generally want to speak out on issues that they think are very important to the veteran community and to potentially to the RSL, and not feel that their membership may be in jeopardy as a result?
Look, I'm not fully on top of all the state bylaws and whether there are restrictions in any of the states from members speaking out, being critical of the RSL. If so, that's a matter I would raise with the state presidents to have a discussion, because I think there should be sensible discussion. But by the same token, a member shouldn't just go direct to the press without going to the state president and saying, look, I disagree with this, and these are the reasons I disagree. What are you going to do about it? And the state president says, I'm not interested, go away. Well, then he can't complain if the person goes direct to the media. But I think it's a matter of courtesy, and also it can be damaging to the RSL when people go out half-cocked and have a go without checking the facts beforehand. So I would have thought the appropriate situation is for a member who wants to speak out to go to his sub-branch president or his state president and say, these are my concerns, am I correct? And if so, what are you going to do about it? If you're not going to do anything about it, I'm going to the press, and so be it.
So Greg, does more need to be done to help facilitate that free and I guess more fluid exchange between their members, the executive, the members between each other? I mean, I know that there's not pure alignment across the league all manner of issues, and particularly so in Victoria. And there is a bit of a situation where the squeaky wheel gets all the attention, and there's a quiet majority out there potentially not saying too much about it and keeping their views to themselves. But I guess part of the frustration is that process you just outlined about going doing the consultative thing and all that sort of thing. It just doesn't seem to be a free and easy process, or is that just a perception?
Well, I can't speak about perceptions of others, but I am concerned when individual members come out and attack me personally on national headquarters because they disagree with the view and they say some stupid things, which are so far removed from the truth it's not funny. I mean, I've been criticised for lack of leadership because I didn't advocate for a Royal Commission. But when I was elected president, I went round to most of the states and territories and talked about our priorities, what we did. And I specifically said we did not support a Royal Commission. We didn't think it was the best model to deal with the problems. I didn't have anybody come to me and say, we disagree with that position, we need a Royal Commission. But when Julianne Finney started her campaign, everything changed. And things started getting posted on social media. But yet again, no state came to me and said, as a state, we've changed our position. So, and a lot of this was exacerbated by COVID, because pre-COVID, I was able to get around and talk to people. During COVID, I couldn't. It may or may not have helped if I was out there. Now, we are aware, quite frankly, national headquarters was missing in action for 4 years, absent without leave or and just wasn't functioning properly. And our website is, quite frankly, archaic. It's been brought up to date. We are doing posts now to let people know what's going on. We should have been doing that earlier, but we just didn't have the resources to do it. We've now got a new CEO who's driving me mad. I get so many emails from him every day, which is great because things are happening. And we are actually posting things on social media and the website. So yes, quite frankly, we're well and truly deficient in that area, and we're trying to rectify it.
So, I mean, some of the things I've spoken to you about, asked you about today, are related to engagement, and I think what you're saying is that there's more than a redoubling of your efforts in that regard and trying to get things a bit closer. And I suppose this interview is a testament to that effort, I guess.
Yeah, look, I've always been available to speak to anybody, but it seems to be a perception that I wasn't. I don't know, that I wouldn't speak to people, or I'd get upset. Right. I don't care if people criticise me unfairly. I don't care how fairly and loud, how loudly they do if it's fair criticism. I do get a bit upset when they go, as I said, go off half-cocked. And I also get upset when they attack other members of the RSL who are doing their best. And they attribute inappropriate motives to those people. I think it's most unfair.
Yeah. So what's your message to those people who do that sort of thing and make those sorts of posts or those, well, not quite allegations, but the innuendo and everything else that goes with it?
I just think they should realise that we're a great organisation. We do so much and can do a lot more, and it doesn't help with all this unjustified criticism. There are people running around saying the system is broken, and I think that's the wrong message to send out to people. If people think the system is broken, they give up, and that's the last thing we want to do. I think the Repatriation Commissioner calls them hope takers, and if these people think we're not doing the right thing, stand for election, become get onto executives, and help. But we have some problems. We have a lot of problems in the RSL because of our structures and our constitutions. One being that we cannot pay anybody or give people an honorarium for doing executive jobs within their sub-branches or their state branches. Now, James Brown and I may not agree on everything, but one thing he was right about was the fact that we're going to move forward. We're going to have to start giving people honorariums. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in the mold we're in now, where most of our executive members are over 70. Yeah. Because a younger veteran who's got a wife and children needs to have some compensation for the income he's giving up to do his executive roles within the RSL.
Is the RSL, in some regards, a victim of its own success in it's a very complicated business, and particularly in some areas of it's gaming and all those sorts of matters that have become part of the fabric of the RSL, and it's very difficult to obviously wind that out. Is that a distraction, do you think, for the executive and people who are sort of more interested in the RSL from a welfare standpoint?
Yes, it is. And my view is I'd like to have no RSL clubs involved with gaming. When I say RSL clubs, I'm talking about clubs actually owned or run by the RSL. Many people are probably not aware that in New South Wales in 1974, they passed an act to separate the licensed clubs from the sub-branches. And so you have a lot of clubs in New South Wales called RSL clubs, which actually have no real relationship to the RSL. We have no say in how it's run. And unfortunately, most of them, we get very little income for veterans welfare from them. So in an ideal world, there'll be no RSL clubs with poker machines, and any clubs with poker machines should not be called RSL. But we have no control over these RSL clubs in New South Wales.
Yeah.
And when we have a compulsive gambler commit suicide because he was allowed to keep gambling and lose over $200,000, the headline is RSL. Not a club not belonging to the RSL.
But it's actually become, at least in Victoria, it's become a fabric, part of the fabric of many of the clubs in Victoria. But I'm involved with a gaming club myself, and there are some benefits to the community having that facility within the confines of an RSL rather than the pub down the road or some other facility where there is a significant less interest in community outcomes and outcomes for members.
I understand that, and quite frankly, I'm not going to dictate to the states whether they have poker machines or not. I just have a personal preference. Yeah. And the counter argument to my preference is, well, if they're going to be, the poker machines are going to be there, and the money is going to be, the gamblers are going to use them wherever they are. It'd be good to see the money come to the RSL rather than going to
and I guess what I'm adding to that argument, Greg, is that it's potentially a safer environment as well.
True. As I said, I'm not criticising clubs. I'm just saying
Yeah, I wanted to circle back on this issue though, because we're talking about the complexity of the RSLs, and I'm using my experience in Victoria that it is a very complicated it's a complicated business, but it's also with significant real estate holdings and very complicated structures around patriotic funds and all those sorts of things. And one of the things you were talking about was honorariums and remuneration. And there's been a little bit of criticism that maybe some of the executive working for RSL getting paid too much and that sort of thing. What's your view on the remuneration of professional executive staff working for the league?
The ones I'm aware of, I think are remunerated more than very appropriately. I mean, our national CEO, quite frankly, the position, if we did a proper study on it, what we should pay, we probably should pay it a lot more, but we were lucky to find somebody who's prepared to work for what we thought was a fair salary. And if you look at New South Wales, I know the CEO of New South Wales gets paid a significant amount more, but the amount of 340, he's got to deal with 348 sub-branches. They've got hundreds of millions of dollars under sub-branch control rather than state headquarters control. State headquarters has got over $100 million in assets. It's the old story: pay peanuts, you get monkeys.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily want our professional executives working for us for free.
No, and we want to get the best people for the job, and to do that, you've got to pay. You can't just rely upon somebody thinking, "Oh, it'll be good to do the RSL job, and I'll do it for bugger all money." I mean, that's what.
On the other side of it, though, it's money raised, by the community and by veterans in the community, and their concerns that's got to be balanced against the welfare spend as well. So It's a tricky balancing act. How do you approach that?
Well, my view is if you have a professional, if you pay somebody appropriately, you have a very professional CEO, he should be able to get out there amongst the community, amongst the business, and generate more income than if you had somebody not as professional as him. And so at the end of the day, the benefit for the veterans is greater for what is a relatively small percentage of the monies gained by the RSL. And I know there are some problems with constitutions. I know there's some problems with legislation. The patriotic funds in Victoria it's a difficult one as to how do you articulate what is being spent on veterans' welfare as opposed to something that's not. Where do you draw the line? Is getting an effective CEO who can get out and earn money and get lots of sponsorship assisting veterans or not? I would have thought yes, but I haven't looked at any of the case law in Victoria about how that fits in with the patriotic fund.
Yeah.
Also, the Veterans Act, which talks about patriotic funds.
Yeah. So how much? I guess there's a lot. This is something I just wouldn't mind just raising as a general sort of side note. I guess there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding, as we know, in all aspects of what's going on in the way organisations such as the RSL runs. And we're talking about the Royal Commission before, and the various points of view about that. I'm thinking about the role of the Chief Executive Officer and the role of the board, the committee. How much of the driving of the steering do the CEOs actually? How much control do they have in those roles?
Well, I can only talk about national, and it's driven by me. I'm lucky I've got a very competent, very loyal CEO, but I take it from whom I take advice. But I'm spending 30 to 35 hours a week in this job. And quite frankly, it gets me down a bit at times. But I do my best to stay on top of issues. I try to be strategic and not get too far down into the weeds. But the things like the Suicide Commission, terms of reference, the Royal Commission. I've had the Prime Minister's been fantastic. I just have to make a telephone call to get an appointment to go and see him. And we drove among others the removing the APS caps for DVA, because I saw the Prime Minister in January about this. And made it quite clear it was unacceptable and what all the problems were creating. And I've got to say, he gave me a very fair hearing, and then said, well, others have been saying the same sort of thing, and now you've given me a lot more information than I had before about the problem it's creating, because we'd got a lot of veterans in the RSL telling us. So we pushed that, and we got a success in the budget, and other issues I've raised with him and the Minister have been taken, have been acted upon. I don't know what's going to happen about the Afghan veterans, the Afghan interpreters and support staff.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Now, you've made some comments publicly, and Kate Banville, who's actually written a couple of articles for us as well, put an article in The Guardian about a month or so ago indicating that a group of Afghan interpreters have delivered a letter to an Australian embassy in Jordan, I think, indicating that they were claiming that about 300 have already been murdered because they were involved with coalition troops. So what's your view on Australia's moral obligation in terms of fast-tracking those humanitarian visas that they're applying for at the moment?
Once again, I use the term no-brainer. We have a moral obligation. We did the right thing by the Vietnamese boat people who came out, and so much so that the Vietnamese are one of the largest ethnic communities in Australia. Part of the problem, we've closed the embassy, or closing the embassy in Kabul. So who processes these people? It's a resource matter, and I know the foreign minister's got a lot on a plate, but we say that we don't care about how much it's going to cost as far as resourcing and other matters are concerned. We have a moral obligation to these people. They've helped us, so we should fast track the visa process, let them come out to Australia, and then determine whether or not they're suitable to become citizens. And it's not only, and I've had people say, well, what's it got to do with the RSL? Well, apart from anything else, there are a lot of veterans who work very closely with these people, and they've suffered enough trauma as it is, and they don't have to have the additional worry about their mates, their locals who help them, being murdered.
And this is the thing too. I mean, we talk about the double-edged sword of social media, but there has been veterans coming out and supporting some of the things that you've said on social media, in particular on Twitter and places like that, saying that we need to get behind this, and there could be a useful groundswell of at least public discussion and dialogue about this. And I suppose there's some of the things that we can draw on. But setting aside a moment some of the possibility of the disturbing, I guess the frightening humanitarian implications of the delays in getting these visas done, what do you think the long-term costs to Australia could be if we don't do the right thing?
Well, there's reputational costs, of course, but I actually think there would be an exacerbation of many people's mental health issues if they feel as though we're abandoning the people who helped us over in Afghanistan. And I don't know what sort of price you put on that. As far as I'm concerned, it's priceless. You can't spend too much money addressing these sort of problems with veterans. And so as far as I'm concerned, the cost should be irrelevant.
All right, Greg Melick, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for covering those topics with us, and I really appreciate your time today.
Pleasure, Mark, and any time.
Thank you. We'll do it again.